Mike Tyson. When people think of Mike Tyson, they see ferocious power, speed, intimidation, but for every towering strength, there's a weakness, and for Tyson, many boxing analysts agree. His lack of adaptability was his biggest flaw. Let me walk you through how that weakness showed up time and again. Tyson's signature defense, the peekaboo style, head movement, tight guard, and explosive counters, was devastating when it worked, but it was also very limited. When an opponent could neutralize that look, keep him out with a jab, use distance, or force him into rounds where that style couldn't land free shots, Tyson often had no plan B. In his astonishing upset loss to Buster Douglas, 1990, Douglas used his jab, reach, and composure to control distance and tempo. Tyson couldn't land his power punches consistently, got frustrated, and was vulnerable. Later, against fighters like Evander Holyfield or Lennox Lewis, Tyson's inability to adjust mid-fight became more obvious. He either tried to force his style harder or got swallowed by counterpunching and ring generalship. In his early career, Tyson could absorb punishment, momentum shifts, and come back with ferocity. But as time passed, that started to crack. His fight output dropped. He became slower to react. His chin and reflexes didn't stay as sharp. Also, his mental state, emotional volatility, and external factors began to intrude more into his performance. All of these compounded the core issue, a reliance on one style without the tools to pivot under adversity. Tyson's internal struggles often intersected with his in-ring shortcomings. Many commentators argue that when the fight got tough, when Tyson was pushed off his rhythm, his temper or frustration would lead him into mistakes or reckless desperation. He lacked the composure or patience to ride through tough patches. Instead, he often got wild, opened up, or lost control. Floyd Mayweather. Floyd Mayweather is remembered as one of the most flawless fighters ever. 50 opponents tried, 50 failed, and not a single one truly solved the puzzle. But even the sharpest armor has its weak points, and for Floyd, the consensus is clear. His biggest vulnerability was when opponents forced him into constant pressure and high-volume exchanges. Mayweather thrived when the fight was at his pace, slow, calculated, built around his shoulder roll defense, and perfectly timed counters. But whenever an opponent swarmed him with aggression, cut off the ring, and kept throwing, he could look uncomfortable. We saw glimpses of this in moments against Jose Luis Castillo, who roughed him up on the inside, and years later against Marcos Maidana, who threw more than twice as many punches as Floyd in their first fight. He still found ways to adapt and win, but those were the rare times when Mayweather's brilliance looked human, the volume forced him off rhythm, and body shots in particular exposed openings in his defense. His shoulder roll guarded one side perfectly, but the other was always slightly more open, especially to the body. In the end, Floyd Mayweather's weakness wasn't catastrophic. Nobody ever exploited it enough to beat him, but it was there. When pressed by relentless volume, he could be forced out of his comfort zone. And for brief moments, the untouchable genius of Money Mayweather looked just a little more vulnerable. Manny Pacquiao. Manny Pacquiao's rise through 8 weight classes is one of the greatest stories in boxing. His speed, southpaw stance, and endless combinations made him look unstoppable at his peak. But even legends have flaws. And for Pacquiao, the biggest weakness was always his struggles with counterpunchers and fighters who could control distance. Pacquiao's style was built on rushing forward, throwing fast combinations, and overwhelming opponents before they could react. It worked on most fighters, but the same aggressiveness left him open. When someone had the timing, the jab, or the counter right hand, they could use his momentum against him. That's exactly how Juan Manuel Marquez gave him so many problems across their 4 fights, finally knocking him out cold in 2012 with one perfectly timed counter right. The same issues showed up against Floyd Mayweather. Pacquiao was the aggressor, but Mayweather used distance and precision to make Manny miss and pay for it. Even before that, against bigger men like Antonio Margarito, Pacquiao's speed won him fights, but he still took heavy shots along the way. In short, Pacquiao's weakness wasn't his heart, his chin, or his power. It was that his style worked best when he set the pace. If an opponent stayed calm, forced him to reach, and timed his rushes, they could slow him down and expose the risks in his all-action approach. Muhammad Ali is remembered as the greatest. Lightning fast hands, incredible footwork, and the charisma to match. But even Ali had a weakness, and it was his tendency to take punishment by relying too much on his toughness. Early in his career, Ali's speed and reflexes made him untouchable. He could dance around heavyweights, lean back from punches, and make world-class fighters miss. But after losing 3 years of his prime when he refused the Vietnam draft, he came back slower. Instead of moving constantly, he began standing in front of opponents and letting them throw, while he absorbed shots on the ropes, the famous rope-a-dope. It worked against George Foreman in the Rumble in the Jungle, but it also meant Ali took an enormous amount of damage throughout the 1970s. His fights with Joe Frazier, Ken Norton, and Ernie Shavers were wars where he was hit far more than he should have been. That punishment caught up to him, both in the later years of his career when he clearly stayed too long, and in his life after boxing with his Parkinson's diagnosis. Ali's weakness wasn't skill or heart. It was that he trusted his chin and courage more than he should have. He could take shots most fighters never could, but the cost was high. In the end, his greatness came with a price. The very style that made him a legend also led to the damage that followed him long after he left the ring. Canelo Alvarez is one of the most complete boxers of this era. Sharp defense, great counterpunching, and some of the best body shots in the game. But even he has a weakness, and it's something that shows up against certain types of fighters. His struggles with elite movers who use speed, footwork, and volume. Early in his career, the biggest example was his fight with Floyd Mayweather in 2013. Mayweather's defense and quick counters made Canelo look one step behind all night. He couldn't cut the ring off, couldn't match the speed, and ended up being outboxed. It was a lesson he carried with him, and to his credit, he improved a lot after that. Years later, we saw something similar against Dimitri Bivol in 2022. Bivol stayed disciplined, used his jab and footwork, and kept Canelo chasing. Whenever Canelo tried to load up on power shots, Bivol made him miss, and then came back with fast, straight counters. Canelo's tendency to throw fewer punches, relying on timing and power instead, hurt him against someone who could keep up a steady pace and stay out of danger. In short, Canelo's weakness isn't durability or skill, it's that fighters who can stick and move, use reach, and stay active can make him look flat. When opponents force him to chase instead of dictate, he struggles to find the rhythm that usually makes him so dangerous. Roy Jones Jr. in the 1990s looked almost superhuman. His speed, reflexes, and athleticism were so far beyond everyone else that he made world-class fighters look ordinary. But that's also where his greatest weakness was hiding. He relied too much on raw athletic ability, and when that started to fade, his style collapsed. Jones fought with his hands low, breaking every textbook rule of boxing. He could get away with it because he was lightning fast and could see punches coming before they landed, but his style was built around reactions, not fundamentals. Once his speed slowed down in the early 2000s, those flaws were exposed. The turning point came after he moved up to heavyweight to beat John Ruiz in 2003, then drained himself back down to light heavyweight. That weight cut seemed to take something out of him permanently. Suddenly, punches that never touched him before were landing clean. Antonio Tarver was the first to really expose it, knocking him out in 2004. A few months later, Glenn Johnson did the same, flattening him with a right hand. Roy Jones still fought for many years, but the truth was clear. Without the blinding reflexes and speed that made him special, he didn't have the fundamentals to fall back on. His weakness was the same thing that made him great. Once his athletic gifts declined, there was no safety net. Tyson Fury has one of the most remarkable stories in boxing, from near retirement and addiction to becoming the lineal heavyweight champion. At his best, he looks almost unbeatable. 6'9", nearly 270 pounds, yet moving like a middleweight with slick head movement and sharp boxing IQ. But even the Gypsy King has a weakness, and it's one that shows up in certain fights: his tendency to get careless and lose focus. When Fury is locked in, he can outbox anyone. His wins over Vladimir Klitschko and Deontay Wilder prove that, but when he switches off, he's vulnerable. Against Wilder in their first fight, he controlled most of the rounds, yet got dropped twice, including the infamous 12th round knockdown where he was nearly counted out. Even in fights against lower level opposition, like Steve Cunningham back in 2013, Fury got careless, dropped his hands, and walked into shots he shouldn't have. Cunningham, a much smaller man, even floored him before Fury rallied back to win. Another area that has been questioned is his conditioning. While he's shown incredible heart and recovery, there have been fights where his weight and stamina look like potential problems. Long layoffs, lifestyle choices, and ballooning in weight between fights have sometimes left him looking rusty or slow to start. In the end, Fury's biggest weakness isn't chin or skill. It's that lapses in focus can leave him open to dangerous shots. His size, skill, and resilience usually bail him out, but when he takes his eye off the ball, even the best heavyweight in the world can suddenly look vulnerable.